Lucille Ball, the tragic solitude behind America's favorite comedienne. In the final chapter of her extraordinary life, Lucille Ball, the woman who once ruled American living rooms with the power to make 44 million people laugh every Monday night, died almost entirely alone. It was April 1989. The red-headed queen of sitcoms, whose name had become synonymous with joy, had spent her last years in a chilling kind of silence. Her grand Beverly Hills mansions echoed with emptiness, save for a few paid staff. Her children kept their distance. The famous friends she'd once laughed with vanished one by one. How did the most beloved woman in television become a forgotten recluse? The answer isn't simple, but it's steeped in heartbreak, betrayal, money troubles, and a long-buried family tragedy that unraveled the empire she spent a lifetime building. Lucille's story began not with laughter, but with loss. In 1915, when she was just 3 years old, her father died suddenly from typhoid fever. He was 27. Her mother was pregnant. The family had been living a nomadic life, hopping from New York to Montana and finally Michigan, following his job with the telephone company. But when disease struck, everything fell apart. Too overwhelmed with grief and despair to raise her children, Lucille's mother sent her to live with an aunt, while Lucille's infant brother went to their grandparents. That fracture left a scar. Lucille later said her childhood was colored by sorrow and superstition. One chilling moment stayed with her forever. Just after being told her father had died, a picture fell from the wall. Outside, a flock of gray sparrows gathered at the window, pecking insistently at the glass. From that day forward, Lucille harbored an intense fear of birds. Not living ones necessarily, but images, paintings, photos, drawings. Even as a Hollywood legend, she refused to stay in hotels if the wallpaper featured birds. That fear never left her, but fate wasn't finished with her yet. At 12, another catastrophe shook the Ball family to its core. Her stepfather, trying to offer a bit of recreation, had set up a target practice range in their backyard. It was supposed to be safe. Rules were clear, rifles aimed toward open fields. But one day, a neighbor boy, just 8 years old, wandered into the area unnoticed. A shot rang out at the wrong time. The bullet hit the boy in the spine. He survived but was paralyzed for life. The boy's family sued. They won. Lucille's family lost everything: their home, their belongings, even their insurance. Her grandfather, overwhelmed with guilt, never worked again. They were forced to leave town in disgrace. Lucille would later describe the accident as the moment her family life shattered for good. By 14, she was caught up in the whirlwind of young love with a 21-year-old local troublemaker named Johnny DeVita. Her mother, alarmed, took a desperate gamble, scraping together what little she had to send Lucille to a prestigious drama school in New York. She hoped it would be a turning point. It was, but not in the way she imagined. Lucille landed in the same class as a rising young star named Bette Davis. While Davis dazzled, Lucille stumbled. The instructors were brutally honest. They told her she didn't have the talent. One version of the story says they even returned her mother's tuition money and suggested Lucille look elsewhere for a future. Years later, Lucille would confess that all she truly learned in that school was how to be afraid. Yet from that fear, she built a legacy, a towering Technicolor legacy. And somehow, behind the zany facial expressions and slapstick genius, that fearful little girl still lingered. Lucille Ball made the world laugh. But behind the laughter, she carried a lifetime of sorrow that few ever saw, until the very end, when the applause faded, the lights dimmed, and the silence finally came. But rejection didn't crush Lucille Ball. It lit a fuse. She came roaring back to New York in 1928, more determined than ever to prove her critics wrong. She wasn't chasing fame for vanity. She was chasing it because somewhere, deep down, she knew she had something the world hadn't seen yet. But just as the doors began to creak open, life blindsided her again. Rheumatic fever. It was vicious. For nearly 2 years, Lucille was bedridden, her muscles weak, her joints inflamed, her dreams frozen in place. As her peers advanced, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, time slipping away like sand through her fingers. Most would have surrendered to the silence. Not Lucille. She replayed every stinging word from her drama school days, every rejection, every humiliating critique. But instead of folding, she forged herself. By the time her body healed, her spirit had been tempered like steel. She came back not just stronger, but sharper, hungrier, and ready to outwork anyone in the room. Around that time, fate tossed her a lifeline. A modeling job with Hattie Carnegie, one of the most sought-after fashion designers in New York. It was a high society world far from the grit of Hollywood backlots. Carnegie liked Lucille's look, but not her brunette hair. "Blonde," she said. "You'll be blonde if you want to make it." Lucille didn't flinch. She bleached her hair, slipped into designer gowns, and learned to glide through rooms with the poise of a debutante. Modeling taught her what acting never had: presence. How to command attention before she even opened her mouth. How to control a room with a glance. How to be a woman who turned heads, not just because she was beautiful, but because she owned the space. That polish became her armor as she plunged back into the grind of early Hollywood. Through the 1930s and early 40s, Lucille took whatever roles she could find: comic foils, ditzy girlfriends, chorus girls with one line and no name. She starred in over 75 films, most of them forgettable. The studios called her the Queen of the Bees, a backhanded compliment if there ever was one. She laughed it off in public, calling herself the Queen of the B+s, but privately it hurt. She wanted more. She deserved more. The truth? Lucille Ball was never built for anyone else's mold. Still, she kept showing up. Every set, every role, no matter how small. She studied the angles, watched the lighting, learned from the directors, sharpened her comedic instincts. She wasn't waiting to be discovered. She was building her own foundation, brick by brick. Then, in 1940, a moment that would change everything. She met Desi Arnaz. They were cast together in the film Too Many Girls. Lucille, already a recognizable name. Desi, a fiery Cuban band leader trying to break into Hollywood. The chemistry was instantaneous, visible, electric. Legend has it, Desi waltzed up to her and asked, "Do you know how to rumba?" Before she could answer, he was showing her the steps. Then he grinned and said, "I can teach you fast, but only if you go out with me tonight." She was hooked. Lucille later admitted she'd never fallen so hard, so fast. Desi was magnetic, boyish charm, dark good looks, and a rebellious streak that thrilled her. The crew could see it from day one. Some even started taking bets on how long it would last. To them, it looked like a whirlwind. Too intense, too fast, too risky. But Lucille didn't care. She said Desi scared her, and that was exactly what drew her in. He was unpredictable, untamed, and after a lifetime of disappointments, that danger felt like freedom. When the film wrapped, they kept their romance alive the only way they could. Long-distance phone calls, coast to coast. And this was no casual courtship. Lucille later said she spent over $29,000 just talking to him. That's not love. That's obsession. By November 1940, they couldn't stay apart any longer. Both happened to be in New York, and on a whim, a bold, passionate, classically Lucille whim, they eloped. Desi was on stage at a theater. Lucille was across town, giving an interview to a magazine. When asked about their whirlwind romance, she laughed bitterly and said it would never last. She'd already seen too much, but fate has a wicked sense of timing. Later that same day, Lucille learned Desi had been seen with another woman. Furious, she stormed over to his place, ready for a showdown. What followed was not the final argument, but an unexpected twist. Desi proposed on the spot. No elaborate speech, no grand gesture, just fire, chaos, and commitment. They jumped in a car and drove to Connecticut, eloping that very night, just 6 months after meeting. It stunned Hollywood. A white American woman and a Cuban man in the 1940s? The town that sold fantasies wasn't ready for that kind of reality. Studios whispered behind closed doors, publicists fretted, executives frowned. They didn't see a power couple, they saw a problem. But Lucille didn't care. Years later, she'd call that elopement the most daring thing I ever did. Her friends scoffed. 6 months, Max, they said. Lucille was even more cynical. I gave it 6 weeks. And in a way, she wasn't wrong, because no sooner had the honeymoon ended than the real trouble began. Desi was on the road constantly with his band. Lucille, locked into the grueling hours of studio life, was up at dawn. Their lives ran on opposite tracks. He was closing nightclubs while she was opening sound stages. Their hours didn't match, and neither did their worlds. And then came the darker truths. Desi's idea of marriage had been shaped by a very different upbringing. His own father had taken him to a brothel at age 12. In Desi's mind, infidelity didn't mean disloyalty, not in the emotional sense. He could sleep around and still believe he was devoted to Lucille. But to Lucille, it felt like betrayal. Every headline, every whisper, every late-night call that didn't come, it chipped away at her trust. And Desi's drinking, which started out as a social indulgence, became something else entirely. By 1944, just 4 years in, Lucille had had enough. The fights were loud and endless. Their daughter, Lucy Arnaz, would later recall a childhood filled with yelling and slammed doors. Lucille filed for divorce. It should have ended there, but it didn't. Their love, as toxic as it was passionate, kept pulling them back in. After the split, they reunited in what the tabloids called a fiery reconciliation. It wouldn't be the last. Their entire marriage became a cycle of combustion, break apart, burn down, then fall into each other's arms again. And so, in the middle of this storm, they had one idea. A last shot at saving both their marriage and their careers. Work together. In 1950, CBS approached Lucille about adapting her popular radio comedy, My Favorite Husband, for television. It was a safe bet. The radio show had a loyal following, and Lucille was a proven comedic force. But Lucille threw the network a curveball. She wouldn't do it unless Desi played her on-screen husband. CBS balked. Hard. They didn't think American audiences would accept a Cuban man with a thick accent as the husband of a red-blooded apple pie American housewife. Interracial marriages were still taboo on screen and still illegal in several U.S. states. Desi wasn't just a casting risk, he was a controversy. But Lucille didn't blink. She and Desi took their case to the people. They hit the road with a live comedy and music act, playing clubs, theaters, any stage that would have them. The result? A revelation. Audiences didn't just accept them, they loved them. The laughs were real, the timing perfect, and the chemistry? Unstoppable. The tour was a triumph. The critics took notice. CBS caved. I Love Lucy was greenlit, with Desi Arnaz as Ricky Ricardo, and Lucille Ball, in fighting for her husband, unknowingly revolutionized television. It wasn't just about casting. When CBS insisted the show be filmed in New York, as most live TV was at the time, Lucille refused. She had no intention of uprooting her life or career from Hollywood. Desi, savvy and forward-thinking, proposed an alternative. Film the show on the West Coast in front of a live audience, using multiple cameras and high-quality 35mm film. That decision changed the industry forever. It created the modern sitcom. It made reruns and syndication a reality. And it turned I Love Lucy into a timeless institution. But behind the laughter, the tension still simmered. Desi Arnaz wasn't just a band leader or the comic foil to Lucille Ball. Behind the scenes, He was a technical visionary. With producer Jess Oppenheimer by his side, Desi helped engineer a bold new way to film television, one that would forever change the industry. Instead of using a single clunky camera and halting the action every few lines, Desi pushed for a radical innovation. 3 cameras rolling simultaneously in front of a live audience. It was risky. No one had done it like this before. But Desi knew that comedy lived and died in the rhythm. And that rhythm couldn't survive endless retakes. The challenge? Finding a studio that could accommodate the technical needs and a live crowd. Eventually, they found one in Hollywood, and with CBS's reluctant help, turned it into something unprecedented. Real-time performance, genuine laughter, cinematic quality footage, all in one package. Desi also insisted on using 35mm film instead of the cheaper kinescope tape. At the time, this seemed excessive, but it would become one of the most lucrative decisions in TV history. Because of the extra production costs, CBS offered Lucy and Desi a deal. Take a pay cut in exchange for ownership of the show through their own company, Desilu Productions. The network thought it was a win-win. Lucy and Desi saw the long game. That one contract would turn I Love Lucy into a financial empire. High-quality film meant I Love Lucy could live far beyond its original air dates, reruns, syndication, global distribution. Lucy and Desi had unknowingly pioneered what would become television's most valuable afterlife. Then came 1952, and another storm of controversy. Lucille Ball was pregnant with their second child, and suddenly, the show faced its biggest cultural battle yet. In post-war America, pregnancy on television was taboo. You could be a wife, a mother, even a housekeeper, but visibly expecting? That was too much. CBS panicked. Philip Morris, the show's tobacco sponsor, nearly pulled out. They demanded the pregnancy be hidden, blocked by tables, disguised with loose clothes, ignored entirely. But Lucy and Desi once again didn't back down. Instead, the writers devised a workaround so clever it became a masterclass in censorship-era creativity. They never said pregnant. They used terms like expecting, with child, and even the French word enceinte. Scripts were sent to religious leaders for approval, and then, in a moment of scripted and real-life synchronicity, Lucy Ricardo gave birth on TV the same day Lucille Ball delivered her son in real life. On January 19, 1953, 44 million Americans tuned in. The legend goes that water pressure dropped nationwide during the broadcast. No one wanted to miss a single moment. It was the kind of cultural flashpoint that defined a generation. After that, there was no stopping I Love Lucy. For 4 out of its 6 seasons, it was the most watched show in America. When it ended in 1957, it was still at the top of the Nielsen ratings, a rare feat matched only by The Andy Griffith Show and Seinfeld. Lucille Ball won an Emmy for Best Comedian. Desi and Jess Oppenheimer won Emmys, too. The show claimed 5 in total and carved out its place in television history, not just as entertainment, but as a model of what TV could become when vision met courage. And the reruns, they never stopped. I Love Lucy aired around the world. In 2012, a global poll crowned it the greatest television show of all time. In 2013, a colorized holiday special brought in 8 million viewers in a single night, more than half a century after it first aired. Behind the glow of success, Lucille and Desi were building more than a hit show. They were constructing an empire. Desilu Productions, born from their need to stay close, became the largest independent TV studio in the country within a few years. In a stunning move, they bought RKO Studios, the very lot where Lucy had once been dismissed as a second-tier star, for $6 million. Under their leadership, Desilu produced classics like The Untouchables, The Andy Griffith Show, and The Dick Van Dyke Show. It was one of the most powerful, prolific creative engines in Hollywood. But success couldn't fix everything. By 1960, the same year they won their final Emmy, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's marriage was over. The cracks that had always been there, infidelity, drinking, the weight of fame, had widened into a canyon. The public was shocked. Together, they had rewritten the rules of television. Apart, they would become something else entirely. And then, Lucy made a move no one saw coming. She bought out Desi's shares of Desilu for $2.5 million, becoming the first woman in television history to run a major Hollywood studio. The woman who had been told she had no talent at drama school, who had been cast aside for years as a B-movie blonde, was now the most powerful woman in television. And she was just getting started. Her brother backed her up too. He confirmed that if there had been a meeting at the house, Lucille wasn't involved. She had likely been at work or away, completely unaware of what was going on under her own roof. But none of that mattered in 1953. This was the height of the Red Scare, when careers vanished overnight based on the flimsiest accusations. People were blacklisted just for being suspected communists. A single rumor could end everything. And this wasn't just any career. I Love Lucy was the biggest show on television. Sponsors had invested millions. CBS was terrified. So was Lucille. For a brief moment, everything she had built, every risk, every fight, every late night on set, was in danger of collapsing. But then Desi Arnaz stepped in. At the next taping of I Love Lucy, he came out before the audience holding the statement Lucille had given to the House Un-American Activities Committee. He read it aloud, calm, clear, proud. Then he looked up and said, "The only thing red about Lucy is her hair, and even that's not real." The audience laughed. The tension broke. And with that line, Desi may have saved Lucille's career. But it wasn't just a clever joke. It was a statement of support, one that told the industry and the public, we're not backing down, we're not scared, we stand together. It worked. The press backed off. The public kept watching. Sponsors stayed on board. And Lucille Ball came out of the scandal stronger than ever. But the truth is, this moment wasn't just about Lucille. It was about what she represented. A woman at the top, navigating a man's world and doing it her own way. Through the 1960s and beyond, Lucille kept breaking barriers. After selling Desilu, she didn't retreat from television. She kept performing, producing, and innovating. Her follow-up sitcoms, The Lucy Show and Here's Lucy, ran for years and drew millions of viewers. She remained a household name for decades. And while many stars fade, Lucille Ball never really did. She became a legend in her own lifetime. In 1989, just a few months before her death, she was honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Tributes poured in. Fellow comedians called her a genius. Women in Hollywood called her a pioneer. But for Lucille, it had never been about awards or headlines. It was about the work, the risk, the grit, the joy of making people laugh, even when everything else felt impossible. She once said, "I'm not funny. What I am is brave." And that's what made her unforgettable. Lucille Ball didn't just help invent modern television. She showed us who it could belong to. The stress took such a toll that Lucille collapsed on stage just a few weeks into the run. Doctors told her she needed rest and the show had to close temporarily. Despite her determination to push through, her body said otherwise. Wildcat officially shut down in 1961 after just 171 performances. It was a huge disappointment for Lucille, both emotionally and financially. But true to form, she didn't let it break her. Instead, she leaned into the stability and support Gary Morton offered. He wasn't just her husband, he became a vital part of her team. Gary helped manage her career and schedule, traveled with her constantly, and offered the kind of quiet encouragement she rarely had in her high-octane life. While he never had Desi's explosive charisma or business genius, Gary brought peace. And for Lucille, that was priceless. In the years that followed, Lucille continued to reinvent herself. She starred in 2 more successful TV series, The Lucy Show 1962 to 1968, and Here's Lucy, 1968 to 1974. Though neither reached the cultural peak of I Love Lucy, both were massive hits and kept her on screen as one of America's most beloved entertainers for over 2 decades straight. Off-screen, Lucille took on a quieter role as a mentor. She encouraged young performers, especially women, to take their careers seriously. She told them to learn the business, fight for control, and believe in their instincts. She often said, "I'm not someone who wakes up feeling funny. I work at it, every day." And that's how she saw her success, not as luck or magic, but as the result of years of grit and craft. By the 1980s, Lucille Ball had become a living legend. She received the Kennedy Center Honors in 1986 and was frequently recognized as a pioneer not just in comedy, but in television history. When she finally returned to network TV with Life with Lucy in 1986, it was meant to be a triumphant comeback. But the show struggled with ratings and was canceled after just 13 episodes. It was a tough pill to swallow, but Lucille handled it with grace. She knew the industry was changing, and after a lifetime of breakthroughs, she had little left to prove. Lucille Ball passed away on April 26, 1989, at the age of 77. The news of her death made headlines around the world. Fans gathered outside CBS studios and left flowers at her Hollywood Walk of Fame star. Comedians, actors, and presidents all paid tribute. Carol Burnett, one of the many stars Lucille had mentored, said it best. She was the first. She made it possible for the rest of us. And maybe that's Lucille Ball's greatest legacy. Yes, she made generations laugh. Yes, she changed how TV was made and watched. But more than anything, she opened the door for women, for risk-takers, for anyone bold enough to believe they could be more than what others expected. Lucille Ball never played it safe. And because of that, the world of entertainment was never the same. With Mame, a lavish musical adaptation of the Broadway hit. It was meant to be her grand return to movies after decades of TV stardom. But Mame was a misfire. Lucille was 62, and while she had impeccable comedic timing, singing and dancing were never her strengths. The critics were brutal. They said she was too old for the part, that her voice had been dubbed awkwardly, and that the film felt dated before it even premiered. Lucy was devastated by the reviews. She had always taken pride in her work ethic, rehearsing endlessly, demanding excellence from everyone on set. But for the first time, it felt like that wasn't enough. Mame flopped at the box office, and the disappointment left a lasting mark. Lucy never made another major film again. Still, she kept moving forward. She made guest appearances, gave interviews, and spent more time mentoring younger comedians. She was proud of her legacy, but didn't want to simply coast on it. When her last sitcom, Life with Lucy, debuted in 1986, there was real excitement. People hoped lightning would strike a third time, but the show struggled to find its footing. Audiences had changed, comedy had changed, and Lucy, for all her experience, was a relic of a different era. The cancellation of Life with Lucy after just 8 episodes was heartbreaking. For someone who had once commanded the attention of nearly half the country, fading into the background was painful, but Lucille Ball was never one to wallow. In her final years, Lucy remained a beloved public figure. She gave speeches, accepted honors, and stayed connected to her fans. She kept up a routine, often waking early, walking her dog, and staying engaged with the industry. She even recorded a final interview with People magazine shortly before her death, where she reflected on her journey. She said she never set out to change television. She just wanted to work and make people laugh. Everything else, she said, was a wonderful accident. Lucille Ball died on April 26, 1989, from a ruptured aorta following heart surgery. She was 77. News of her passing made front pages around the world. Tributes poured in from fans and stars alike. Lucille's ashes were later moved to Jamestown, New York, her hometown. where thousands of fans still visit each year. Today, Lucille Ball remains one of the most important figures in entertainment history. She didn't just break barriers, she bulldozed them. She proved that a woman could lead, own, negotiate, and command respect in an industry that had long dismissed her as just the funny girl. She taught generations of performers, especially women, that it was okay to be loud, messy, ambitious, and brilliant. She showed the world that comedy could be smart and silly, that business could be creative, and that television could be timeless. And maybe most of all, she showed us what it looks like to bet on yourself, even when no one else will. End. Lucille Ball's death marked more than just the loss of a beloved entertainer. It marked the passing of a pioneer who had helped shape the very foundations of modern television. In the days and weeks after her passing, tributes flooded in from fans, fellow actors, comedians, and politicians. The front pages carried her image, and TV networks aired I Love Lucy marathons in her honor. Even those who hadn't grown up watching her felt the weight of her legacy. She was remembered not just as the queen of comedy, but as a trailblazer who had broken barriers for women in entertainment, a savvy businesswoman, and a symbol of resilience. Lucy's ashes were eventually moved to her hometown of Jamestown, New York, where a museum and annual festival still celebrate her life and work. There, fans gather to laugh, remember, and recognize the brilliance of a woman who changed entertainment forever. Her impact can still be seen in every sitcom filmed before a live audience, every woman who takes the lead role in comedy, and every rerun that proves great work never really fades. In the end, Lucille Ball got what she had always fought for, not just laughs or fame, but legacy. Her story wasn't just about making people laugh. It was about persistence, about believing in your own worth, and about never letting the world forget what you can do. Even now, more than 3 decades after her death, Lucille Ball lives on, in black and white, in color, in syndication, in streaming, and in the hearts of those who still hear her laugh echo through the ages.